the future of AI is here, opening opportunities to elevate Vietnam's new global position. Jeff Dean, Google Chief Scientist, a name synonymous with pioneering AI innovation at Google, the visionary behind Google Brain and the driving force behind Gemini at Google DeepMind. Now he joins us here in Vietnam, where exceptional Vietnamese talents have collaborated with him to lead AI revolutions at Google.
Chào mừng quý vị đến với Tham Bloom Synergy. Tôi là Khổng Loan. So Vietnam love new things. AI generative, very interesting new topic. What makes human being unique?
The potential of AI to transform the world is very, very large. And I think Vietnam is in a very good position with your sort of strong education system. Bringing many, many people into this field is going to be really important.
Jeff Dean có thể nói là một cái huyền thoại ở Google. Những cái gì mà nền tảng nhất của Google như là Big Table, TensorFlow, Gemini là từ bác đó mà ra hết. Nếu mà không có Jeff Dean là có thể nói là không có Google.
Một con người mà giỏi về kỹ thuật, Jeff Dean hiện tại là một trong những người code nhiều nhất ở Google. Giỏi về công tác, có những người biết tên thôi nhưng mà có những ý tưởng hay là Jeff Dean cũng có thể là công tác. Giỏi tầm nhìn, đòi hỏi sự dũng cảm rất là lớn.
Jeff, thank you very much for spending time with me. It's my honor to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.
So you are called like God of engineering. How does it feel to be a god? How does it feel?
I don't know about a god of engineering. I mean, I really like the problem-solving aspect of engineering and how can you build things that are useful to many people. And I think one of the beauties of software development and AI is relatively small groups of people can work together to tackle some problem and then have many, many people use the solution that they've built. And I think, that's what every engineer wants, is to have impact in the world in a way that, people love and respect your work.
So we had a very long day for the conference, but very exciting. We have a full room of people.
Yes.
What was the observation? What was your experience?
General observation is there's a lot of passion and excitement about generative AI and AI in Vietnam, among students, among entrepreneurs, among people who are sort of thinking about how AI can be used to sort of solve real problems. And I think that's just a general feeling of buzz in the air about AI.
So Vietnam love new things. AI generative is very interesting new topic, right?
Yes.
So it opens countless, limitless capability. But at the same time, we understand that there's certain kind of limit for what AI could do. So my question for you is that for human being, if AI could help us so many different things, so what makes human being unique and relevant? How we stay smart in this smart world?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way of viewing AI is it's an incredibly helpful tool. And in some cases, it can become better than humans at doing some things, but humans can bring together, their own thinking and problem solving skills and partner with AI and build and solve problems in ways that is better than any human or any AI system. Like the two together will actually work in concert and produce, better outcomes in nearly every case than an AI system alone or a human alone. And that, I think, is the potential and the sort of excitement that people see is really how do we augment what humans can do with AI.
Let's talk about ethical AI. I know that is one of your topic that you're very interested talking about.
Yeah.
So tell me about what in ethical AI makes you most concerned about. How are you solving the problem or issues around that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of examples of, areas that you need to be, to really think carefully about when you're applying AI. So one is when you're training AI systems, often they learn from data, and that data often comes from the real world. And the real world is sometimes not the world that we want it to be, it's the world as it is. And so one of the ways that you can really help with AI and you need to be aware of is how do you kind of avoid perpetuating biases that exist in the world through data and even accelerate them, because AI systems can then use that data to make similar biased decisions more quickly. So that's a danger you need to avoid. And one of the ways you can avoid that is by making sure that the systems you train are sort of free from unfair bias and are as free as possible. And so there's a whole bunch of research techniques that can help reduce bias of AI systems, that can help eliminate certain kinds of bias data from training of AI systems. And this is just one example of many considerations in deploying real AI systems in the world. And Google has a set of responsible AI principles that we published in 2018. There's 7 principles, and the bias issue is one of them. I think it's really good to think through all of those issues as you're thinking about what problems you want to solve with AI and how you're going to solve them.
So for countries like Vietnam, we would like to build up AI capability. What would be the 3 most important considerations, in your opinion, for the policymakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think policymakers should think about how can you best educate people, both current students, but also people who are maybe already in the workforce and want to pick up AI skills to be able to apply them to solve problems in their sort of whatever field of endeavor they're in, or whatever organization or company they're in. So that's one consideration: is what is the best way to get that into the everyday processes of as many people as possible. I think another area is how do you encourage students who are interested in all kinds of different topics to think about AI as a tool that you can then apply to many different kinds of problems in the world or in society. And then also to think about what are the ways in which you can have the most impact in different areas that are important to Vietnam. So I think thinking about areas like education or healthcare, those are all areas where I think AI will have a pretty significant impact, and policymakers should adopt policies that sort of try to maximize that benefit.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a wonderful chance to talk with you.
Thank you for the insightful questions.
This is the first time Jeff Dean has come to Vietnam. He shares his vision for the future of machine learning, Vietnam's potential and position in the global technology industry. But Dean's focus extended beyond technology. He has a deep interest in the young Vietnamese generation, a generation he sees with promise. Many may even become colleagues in shaping the future of AI, just as he now collaborates with outstanding Vietnamese minds like Tang Luong and Quoc Le.
The problems in the world really require getting people together to focus on those problems, and that, for the most part, shouldn't be constrained by national boundaries.
This brings us to an exciting question. How might AI transform education to not only learn but contribute to the world in meaningful ways?
So I would like to start by thanking you for having me today. As a student, I am very intrigued on the ways in which the development of AI will affect my education. So as you know, the use of AI has become very popular in learning as well as teaching, to the extent that many countries are now forced to apply policies and legislations with the AI use in education. So what do you think about this issue? Can AI replace the role of a teacher?
I think AI is going to complement teachers and enable them to sort of better address student understanding and student needs. If you think about, there's a lot of research on, the ability of students when they have an individualized tutor is much, much better than if they're in a traditional classroom setting where you might have one teacher and 30 students. Now, many people don't have the means to have an individualized tutor, and teachers, as much as they would like, really can't spend as much one-on-one time with students as they would really hope. So I think what the potential of AI can bring to education is really about how do you give as much of that individualized tutoring experience to students while enabling the teacher to focus on spending more time on what they really love, which is helping students gain understanding. So I think it's going to be a little while to figure out exactly the ways in which AI systems can really help in educational settings, but I think there's a lot of potential there. And over time, I think the ability to have a tutor that knows you and knows some material you're trying to learn and really understands how you learn best is going to be one of the ways in which, AI really fulfills its educational potential.
Thank you. So you would assume that AI would be used in furthering the development of educational tools rather than hindering it and taking away the significance of teacher to student contact?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we know teachers have a really valued role in students sort of learning. They're inspiring role models. They are, really helpful in helping students figure out their interests and their passions. But if you can also augment that with sort of AI-assisted instruction or tutoring, that I think will be even better.
I also hope that in the future, AI can be like a new calculator. So then you can use AI, just Demis said, right? You can use AI to study deeper about physics, science. I often told my son that maybe he should study the universe, and then hopefully he will in the future help us occupy Mars, make a lot of progress in science, drug discovery, etc. Would be quite powerful.
As technology progresses, so does our goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should embrace AI systems as an additional educational tool, in the same way that there were, when calculators, as Tong was saying, entered kind of practical use in mathematics. Some people were resistant to that because, people will never learn to multiply numbers or something. But it turned out you can actually use it as a tool and enable students to go farther because they're now using this tool and can extend their mathematical horizons more quickly. So I think AI is sort of that, but not just for simple calculations, but for any subject.
To further our learning.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Tang. So generative artificial intelligence is a new generation of AI that can do many extremely difficult tasks, as Google has just released 2 AI models specializing in solving math problems at the same level as students competing in the International Mathematical Olympiad. So in your opinion, how can we maintain the human advantage in the application of AI in education?
That's an interesting question. So yeah, I have been telling we really have to rethink education. So maybe let me make sure that I understand your question correctly. It's a question about given new tool like alpha geometry, alpha proof, very good at math, right? How would that affect student learning?
Yeah, the competitive advantage, because there might not be a need for students to work as hard if there's
So when we have alpha geometry, people was worried that there will be no geometry at the IMO. And Vietnamese actually love geometry. I myself did a lot of geometry. My teachers, famous teacher, did a lot of geometry. So they was quite nervous about the fact that AI gonna knock down one topic at a time. But I think it will eventually happen. I felt that AI will master though. But then I think we can take advantage of that. Maybe we'll take advantage of the fact that AI is really good about reasoning basic math, right? We can then try to encourage students to go from just imitate, just try to solve whatever had before into a new regime of discovery. So maybe a new assignment for students would just be maybe they don't solve existing problem, but they try to come up with some new problem or try to solve some kind of new problem. I think that could be the new future. But there's a problem that actually, how would we evaluate the assignment? That would maybe take some effort because there's no non-solution. But maybe that's how, yeah.
To your point, I think students should always work hard.
No, as a high schooler, and living in the era of the development of AI technology, I can see that. So I study the IB program, but I can see that the school is trying to implement new ways to kind of test our knowledge. So rather than assessing the work that we produce, which could have used the assistance of AI, they're trying to assess us based on how well we understand the work that we produce, to show academic integrity and authenticity in our work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the ultimate goal of any student-based assessment is, do you understand the material, right? And I think that is kind of an imperfect art, is how do you perfectly assess what students understand and what they don't understand. But I do think it is appropriate to kind of figure out what the ground rules should be for uses of, say, generative AI systems in assignments and classrooms and homeworks and so on, and like make sure that students are sort of not cheating themselves by taking shortcuts, but are really relying on this in ways where it's a tool that they can use to help them further their understanding.
This is a more general question, but in many places today, people are still skeptical of AI and afraid that it will replace human labor. So in your opinion, what are some human qualities that cannot be replaced by AI?
A more general view of this is I always think in a lot of cases where people are trying to apply AI, having an AI plus a human-based system in order to sort of accomplish things is better in many cases than either a human alone or an AI system alone. So I think those are areas where you want to think carefully about the overall way in which you're building software or systems or applications. I think there's a lot of cases where things like, human interaction is much more natural between two people at the moment than a person and an AI system. Things like empathy, things like creativity. I think humans are quite good at, and AI systems are getting better at that. But it's still kind of pretty clear when you see something that it's AI. It's not as creative as the most creative humans. So.
Yeah, I think would be great to somehow define values for AI. So I think that would be a great research questions. Having some values. Maybe we have different persona of AI system. Also, like I think, as Jeff said, like empathy. I think emotion. These are something that actually would be quite important. I think the EQ part. IQ can be great, but I think EQ. We need to make AI better at that.
Yeah, and to your point about sort of AI guidelines, I think one thing that Google has done is we have a set of AI principles of 7 basic principles that we think about when we're sort of working to ask ourselves the question of like, how should we apply AI to this particular problem or this new product or this particular feature? And I think they're a pretty useful framework for thinking about that, understanding bias, can this thing that we're thinking about be socially beneficial? All these kinds of things I think are quite useful to think about.
So when working to develop AI, do you also think about the extent to which it should be used? Like, is there a limit to when AI should not be further implemented?
I mean, I tend to think about that in terms of particular applications, right? So I think you do want to think carefully about how is this AI system going to be used in an autonomous vehicle or in a robotic system. And that then I think gives you, a particular concrete thing or concrete area you're thinking about. I think it's very hard to reason in the abstract about AI and what it should and shouldn't do, because really it comes down to what are you going to use it for? And then that imposes some constraints and some guidelines and some, rough parameters at which you should be, contemplating.
So narrowing it down to the Vietnamese demographic, what are your thoughts on the abilities of some Vietnamese engineers currently working at Google? Because since I am a Vietnamese student, I wonder of our stance in the technological industry and whether the few of the gifted Vietnamese students would be able to find success in pursuing these fields of AI internationally.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really value is I'm able to work with really talented people from all over the world, including I have many talented Vietnamese colleagues like Tung and my other colleague Quoc, who's here in town with me. I think the problems in the world really require getting people together to focus on those problems, and that for the most part, shouldn't be constrained by national boundaries. And so you want the best and brightest people to be able to collaborate together and to work together on important problems. And that includes, many hardworking Vietnamese students who then go on to become successful, researchers or, entrepreneurs or whatever. I think there's a great opportunity ahead for for excited people.
And in fact, only this trip, I realized that you, Kwok, and me have the same interest, which is soccer.
Oh,
Which a lot of Vietnamese he actually love big fan of soccer. That's what it's like.
So now I have a few questions from my peers.
okay.
Like friends I study with, so around my age. So a few of them are interested in STEM, so they asked how a student would begin to learn how to code or like make AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good question. It's sort of how do you sort of gently introduce yourself or take classes or whatever to this. I mean, I think one of the things to do is to start with small problems, like find some problem you think will teach you something or that will solve a problem you might care about, and try to write a simple program to do that with the aid of many online resources these days for both introduction to programming and computer science and software, but also there's now a lot of online resources about introductions to AI and machine learning at a variety of different sort of levels of sophistication. So I think assess what it is you know already and try to pick something that's at roughly the right level. Maybe it's a simple blog post explaining the basics of the idea. Maybe it's a calculus-based introduction to machine learning that's maybe a little more sophisticated and has an online textbook. There's some excellent, Coursera courses on a lot of these topics that are sort of like introductory college level material for ambitious students to kind of look at. I think learning by doing is always the best, though, because once you start writing little programs to do something, then you start gradually building, a little bit fancier program or something that can do more things to solve some problem you care about. And if it's something you care about, you're going to be much more excited and motivated to teach yourself, how to solve it.
I think you can even start with Dell programming. Mm-hmm. So we taught we have a course at NTI that like Gen AI for everyone, mm-hmm. where you can just do right? Normally, I think normal people, when they ask Gemini, ChatGPT, they ask only very simple questions. But then as you use more, you will learn that you can add more instruction. Maybe like the description, the story about, this like two animals should have only 5 sentences, like 50 words, like use certain word or something like. Well, I also learned myself to become a good prompt engineer. Mm-hmm. So I think you can also, student can do something like that first. Even like we have students where they just do basic Gen AI without any programming. They can create like an interesting story, like with visualization, about history, etc. Yeah. And then as you get more familiar with those, as you use them more, then you can think even more like, let's say if you want to build to just talk in let's say teen language. So maybe you just start to learn a bit more. Maybe you collect some kind of like essay of your style, and then start to fit the LM, the Gen AI model, and it can start to write in your own style. So you build up slowly, and then I think even maybe in the next few years, maybe you don't need to do programming. Maybe you just need to write a good prompt, and it will teach you how to do programming. What do you think, Jeff?
I love programming, so I will say often people can get a lot of value out of learning to program because it not only teaches you how to write software, but it, the process of writing software is really about taking complicated problems and breaking them down into simpler pieces. And how do you solve all those individual pieces and then put the solutions together into something that works? And that kind of structured organizational thinking, organized thinking is useful in a lot of other things in life than just writing software. So even if you don't go on to become a professional software developer, I think that way of approaching problem solving is something that you can derive a lot of benefit from. And, everyone should try it. It's fun. I find it fun. It might not be for everyone, but you should actually, try it, explore it, see if you like it, get some friends together, learn to program together. It's fun.
And it's much simpler now. Like in 10 years ago, when I write my PC thesis, I wrote in MATLAB, by the way, using deep learning on GPU. You have to write like 100 lines of code. Whereas now with Python, with the deep learning thing, you can just write in like 5 lines of code. So it's already much similar, but you still learn the concept, the basic concept, and then build very cool stuff with deep learning and AI and Gen AI.
Yeah, I would say when you're to the point of picking some problem you care about. The way I learned to program was at that time, you couldn't sort of download new games or whatever. You could only type in game software from a book and then get it into your computer at home, and then you could start to play the game. And once you kind of do that, then you learn a bit about programming because you're just typing in the software and you sort of understand the basics of that. But then you can start to modify the game because then you're like, well, I like this game, but it'd be cool if it had these other, features or rules. And, that I find is a good way for young people to kind of get into programming is they find some game they like playing and then they start to modify the source code.
So find like an existing piece of programming and then use it and start to adapt it to your own way.
Yeah, I actually think you learn a lot from studying existing software code because that's been written by someone who probably has more, programming experience than you do. And there's a lot of like subtle techniques in programming that you can often pick up fairly easily from seeing other people's code that you don't very easily come up with on your own. And so I think becoming a good programmer is often about reading other people's code. In addition, if you're going to work on, a fairly complex software project, there's often many people involved in writing pieces of it, and you'll run across lots of code you haven't written yourself that you need to understand. So that's a good skill to have as well.
Another question is, earlier during the panel discussion, you talked about the importance of working with others to succeed. So could you share some examples of people that you've worked with who's inspired you and helped you further your research?
Sure. So one of my longest collaborators is my good friend Sanjay Gamawat. So he and I actually worked together before I joined Google. And then I moved to Google and I convinced him to join. And we've worked on a number of different projects over the years. We actually do what's called pair programming, where instead of having people writing code at two separate computers, we actually sit together and use one keyboard, one mouse. He usually types because he's pickier about spacing. But we sort of work through the problem-solving process together. And often I think that you find that, when you're writing a piece of software, there's literally 1,000 decisions you need to make in, some, few days of work. And when you're actually working with someone, you often will talk through some of those decisions that are pretty consequential that you would make on your own if you weren't working with someone. And so that actually ends up with a much better result because you sort of have a more, you have an outer dialogue rather than just an inner dialogue about how to solve this particular aspect of something. And I think he and I have very complementary kinds of viewpoints. I'll be like, let's go solve this. And he'll be like, hang on, let's think about it and how we're going to actually solve it. And I think that's a nice way of working. I think I've collaborated with my colleague Khoa, who's here in town, and he and I, he has much more machine learning expertise, and I have some expertise on how do you build large-scale distributed systems where you're using many, many computers to solve problems. And so Kwok and I collaborated on a project to use lots of computers to train a pretty interesting unsupervised machine learning model. The cat paper, yes. So we actually trained the model on 10 million random YouTube video frames. And it sort of learned the concept of a cat without ever being told what a cat was, which was kind of cool.
That's the legendary paper.
Right. But I think that's a nice example because Kwok and I brought different kinds of skill sets to the collaboration along with some of the other people involved in the collaboration. And we all worked together to see if we could solve this research problem. And I picked up more stuff about machine learning from Kwok, and he picked up more stuff about how do you build distributed systems. And then we kind of, went on our ways and worked on other things together and sometimes worked separately. So I think that kind of thing where you bring a mix of people who are not identical, every time you do that, you learn something.
Yeah, I'm at Google, I'm actually personally curious about how you and Sanjay can keep collaborating for that long time. Like, do you always have the same interests, or is there any point where you have diverse interests? Maybe you do health, like he do robotics, you do, I don't know, deep learning.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, periods where we haven't worked together for, on this particular project, but we always find something to work on together. I mean, I think that's part of the hallmark of a good collaboration is you can convince each other, maybe this problem that the other person wasn't thinking about is actually important and we should work on it for a while. So that's very cool. It can. It doesn't always.
Okay. So final question for you today. Do you have any words of wisdom for students who may be looking to join this industry?
I think there's so much potential in AI and it's such a broad space that you should really, learn about it in general. But because it's such a broad space, you have the opportunity to kind of identify what are the particular problems or applications of AI or, research problems eventually you might want to tackle. Generally leads to much better outcomes and happiness is if you're working on a problem or an area you're particularly passionate about. So, maybe it's robotics, maybe it's I really want to work on AI for healthcare, maybe it's I just want to make, really interesting learning algorithms that are different than the ones that people are using today. Maybe it's I want to do systems engineering to make things more efficient. There's 50 other topics like those that I think can find some appeal for people who just have a general interest in AI.
So it's just about like pursuing what you're passionate in.
It sounds trite, but I do find that is good advice because I think, I've certainly in my career, tried to focus on what are problems I find interesting and are likely to be impactful. And I think that, that's what you should really strive for in what you're going to do, what you're going to study in school, what you're going to work on after that.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I just say maybe like be curious and don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Because like let's say if they want to do AI, just go and write some piece of code.
Mm-hmm.
And even like for people who are very deep in technical, I would often advise students like try to write some code base from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like read some paper, just like maybe look at some reference code and then just write from scratch.
Yeah.
I often see the case that anyone who can wrote a large piece of code from scratch are usually a good candidate that we're looking for.
I think that's all from me for today.
Great. Thank you for the
Thank you so
question.
much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for sitting down with us.